bring in Mike Florio, ProFootballTalk.com. Aaron Rodgers going to play this weekend, Mike?
Well, it's been 6 weeks and 1 day since he broke his collarbone. They're going to do another scan in the coming days. I'd be shocked if he doesn't, unless you've just got a doctor who wants to be so careful with his collarbone, he's not going to let him play. There was some suggestion of tension last week that Rodgers wants to play. Matt Flynn, maybe they don't need him, but I'd be shocked if he doesn't play nearly 7 weeks removed from breaking the collarbone.
NFL going to levy any fines or suspensions they hit on the Bengals punter?
I don't think there'll be a suspension, but I'm convinced there'll be a fine. It definitely is a violation to go helmet to helmet or helmet to chin, as the case may be, on a punter or a kicker. They're defenseless at all times. They're protected against those hits, and that should have been a flag, and it most likely will be a fine announced on Friday.
But I don't understand that they're defenseless if they're trying to make a tackle. I mean, I've seen kickers and punters make some pretty good tackles.
Well, I know, but at all times, under the rule, a kicker and a punter is a defenseless player, so they almost have that license to go stick their head in there, and if they get popped, they're supposed to draw a flag, although it didn't happen the other night.
Well, wait a minute. They're allowed to hit people. Like Pat McAfee had one of the bigger hits of the year.
I know, but there's still the rule says they're defenseless. It can create a weird situation if a guy goes in there and actually sticks his head in a situation to try to make a tackle. And in that situation, you'd expect a guy to not draw a flag. But when a guy launches with the top of his helmet into a punter's chin, you got to get a flag on that, and you're definitely going to get a fine.
Coach is on the hot seat. We're getting close to the end of the season here, regular season. Anybody in trouble?
Well, every year we see some guys go, but Leslie Frazier supposedly in trouble. There was a report over the weekend. The Vikings reached out to Bill O'Brien, the Penn State head coach. That's not a good sign. But the Vikings have really rallied and played well over the last month. Rex Ryan in New York, you have to figure he may be in some serious trouble now that the Jets have been eliminated from the postseason. You got to wonder what's going to happen with Tom Coughlin. I think the Giants may hope that he decides to retire. And if the Lions don't make it to the playoffs this year, with all the talent they have and all the issues with quarterbacks in the NFC North, they can't win that division now. They never will. I think Jim Schwartz is going to be out.
I wonder if Rex Ryan has bought himself another year here.
Well, it's just when you bring in a new GM and you keep the head coach, you're asking for trouble unless you make it to the playoffs. And if he doesn't get fired, they're going to have to figure out what they do by way of extending him. And, I didn't even mention Shanahan. We've all come to accept the fact he's not going to be back in D.C., but we've seen crazy things happen. And the question always becomes, Dan, who are you going to replace him with? Plenty of coaches have gotten extra years because the owner wasn't convinced they were going to find somebody better to come in and take over.
The Richie Incognito story is quiet, but to me, there's something else there. The fact that they're going to continue to pay him, and he volunteered, he said, I'll take the 2-game suspend. You can continue to suspend me, but you still pay him. What do you make of this story with Incognito with the Dolphins?
Well, I'm surprised Incognito didn't push the issue and say, look, either put me back on the team or cut me and let me go join a playoff team. This guy's been in the NFL 9 years. He's never played in a playoff game. But I think that he's decided to go along with whatever the Dolphins want to do, thinking that at the end of the day, whether it's the Dolphins, the NFL, whoever, he's going to get favorable treatment when this report comes out. He isn't putting anybody in a tough spot. He's being very compliant. The NFL is going to have the final say on what happens with him. I think he's trying to be as cooperative as he can be in the hopes that he'll land somewhere next year. He's going to be a free agent. Highly unlikely ever plays for the Dolphins, but he's going to want somebody to welcome him onto their team for 2014.
One other item, I saw this with the Wall Street Journal. They had an interesting story, how Seattle and San Francisco are benefiting from having inexpensive quarterbacks. Now, they were smart enough to be able to get Russell Wilson in the 3rd round. They get Kaepernick in the 2nd round. That's nice. Do you see other teams doing this so you don't have to pony up that big money for quarterbacks and you can spend it as Seattle and San Francisco did on their defense?
Well, yeah, if you can find a quarterback in the 2nd round or the 3rd round that can come in and be a starter and be a great quarterback, but that's a crapshoot. I mean, and the problem is the gravy train's going to end for the 49ers after this year. Kaepernick's going to want to get paid, especially if he takes him back to another Super Bowl. And after next year, the Seahawks are going to have to give Russell Wilson a big contract. And look at what the top of the market is. You're looking at $20 million a year. So it's a short term. It's a great thing in the short term, but the payday ends up coming if you have high success with that inexpensive quarterback.
And you also look at this quarterbacking class. We thought it was going to be really deep, really loaded, and now you got a lot of these kids who are saying, I'm going to go back into college for one more year. What's that going to do where we thought maybe 6 quarterbacks in the first round this year?
Well, what it's going to do, it's going to get Jay Cutler paid a lot of money, because teams that were thinking we're going to get the quarterback we need in round one, and maybe they're going to decide to go out and pay for a Jay Cutler, because regardless of how much these guys are getting paid and how they're performing, because, is Matthew Stafford earning his contract? It doesn't matter, because if you don't have a franchise-level quarterback, you have a limited chance to make it to the postseason and be a consistent contender in the NFL. So if the team sense that the supply isn't going to be there in the draft, then some of these guys who are going to be available via free agency are going to get more money.
One more item here. We were talking about how these place kickers are so good that, you kick one. It used to be when you're kicking past the 50, it may have been 50-50. These guys they're killing it. And then last night, Tucker from 61 yards out. You had Prater from 64 yards out earlier this year. Could you see the NFL looking at place kicking and maybe narrowing goalposts, giving more points for longer field goals, making it more dramatic? Because it seems like it's automatic, not dramatic, although last night was at the end of the game. But it seems like it's almost too routine for these guys.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think narrowing the goalpost at some point is something to consider, or maybe popping it up another couple of feet, up to 12 or 13 feet, just to make that a harder kick from farther out. I remember back in the 70s, it was a big deal when a guy made a 40-yard field goal. Now, if you miss a 40-yard field goal, you're a bum, and we're starting to expect guys to make from 50 to 55.
Safe travels, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
All right, see you, buddy.
Mike Florio, ProFootballTalk.com, also contributes to Football Night in America.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.